The bar is half empty, washed in that dim orange glow that always makes the cheap whiskey look like liquid gold. Archie Bunker sits in his usual corner, nursing a drink he doesn't really want, listening to a jukebox that hasn't been updated since the Eisenhower years. Outside Queens hums, with the noise of a city moving on without him. New buildings, new people, new rules. Inside, everything stands still. The men around him talk about the Mets, about the price of gas, about nothing at all. But Archie is somewhere else entirely, thinking about a waitress with laughing eyes and a voice that still echoes in the back of his mind like the chorus of an old song he can't stop humming. Denise was the kind of woman who smiled with her whole face, the kind who called every man sweetheart but made each of them believe she meant it just for him. For Archie, she was a reminder of a time when he was still sharp, when his jokes landed, when women laughed, not out of politeness, but out of genuine delight. She called him cute. No one had called him that in years. The word hit him like sunlight through dirty glass, warm, unexpected, dangerous. At home, Edith was folding laundry. The television murmured in the background. Their conversations had become small. Where's the salt? You forgot the milk. After 30 years of marriage, words had turned into habits, and love had turned into maintenance. Archie didn't cheat because he wanted passion. He went to the coffee shop because it was the only place where he still felt alive. But sometimes even the smallest flame can burn down a house. That night, after Edith left to deliver a set of dentures to a 90-year-old man at the Sunshine Home, Archie stood in front of the mirror debating with his reflection. The man staring back at him looked tired, older than his years. "Ain't nothing wrong with a little company," he muttered, straightening his collar. He took a bottle of tawny port, cheap, sweet, and delusional, and walked out into the night. Denise's apartment was small but warm. The smell of perfume hung in the air, something floral, faintly artificial, the scent of escape. Archie tried to act casual, but every word felt rehearsed, every gesture clumsy. He bragged about Italy, about the war, about chocolate bars and pretty girls. He sang a line of an Italian song badly. Denise laughed. For a moment, he believed it was all right to feel wanted again. But when the delivery boy arrived, a kid with slick hair and knowing eyes, Archie saw himself reflected in the smirk of youth. "Have yourself a ball," the boy said. And suddenly, the room felt too small, the lights too bright, and the wine too sweet. He left before anything happened. But something had already happened. The line between thought and action had blurred, and Edith's trust, though she didn't know it yet, had cracked. When he came home, she was waiting with her gentle smile and her endless patience. The house smelled of dinner gone cold. Archie tried to hide behind bluster and excuses, but Edith had known him too long. She asked simple questions that no man can answer without lying. "Where were you? Who were you with? Why are you smelling like perfume?" The lies tumbled out like broken glass bowling, poker groceries, anything but the truth. But when she found the slip of paper with Denise's number, the room fell silent. For the first time, Archie saw his wife not as the quiet woman who stood by him through everything, but as someone capable of leaving. Her hands trembled as she held the note, but her voice didn't. "Whose number is this?" she asked. He looked away. The silence between them was heavier than any argument. "I didn't do nothing," he finally said. "We had a drink, we talked, that's all." But Edith wasn't angry about the act. She was hurt by the choice. "You kissed her," she whispered. He didn't answer. She walked to the door slowly, like someone moving through water. "The one thing I could always count on was you," she said. "Now I can't count on you no more." And then she left. Days passed, though they felt like years. Archie tried to fill the silence with noise. At Kelsey's, he told stories, made jokes, argued about boxing, pretended he was fine. His friends, drunk and bored, played along. But every time the laughter faded, he heard the echo of his own voice telling the Martian joke that no one ever really found funny. The bar smelled of stale beer and loneliness. He started to realize that the freedom he always claimed to want felt a lot like being forgotten. Meanwhile, Edith found solace among the old souls at the Sunshine Home. She took care of people who had nothing left but stories. The patients loved her. She made them laugh, listened to their aches, stitched their buttons, and mended their dignity. For the first time, she felt needed for who she was, not just for what she provided. She even joked to Gloria that she could live there forever. But the truth was simpler. She wasn't running away from Archie. She was remembering how to stand without him. When Gloria visited, begging her mother to come home, Edith smiled sadly. He was thinking about doing what he said he didn't, she said. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. Archie's betrayal had taught her something profound, that love without respect is just habit, and habit without honesty is just survival. Archie, stubborn as ever, refused to apologize. Pride had always been his armor, and now it became his cage. But pride has a way of cracking when it's left alone too long. One night, standing in front of the quiet house, he realized he missed her voice. The way she'd ask, "Is that you, Archie?" Even when she knew it was him. It was a small thing, but in that smallness lived the comfort of a lifetime. He finally went to see her, not with flowers or speeches, but with awkward small talk about painting the porch. They spoke like strangers who still remembered the same dreams. "Was she pretty, Edith?" asked eyes steady. "I told you it didn't mean nothing," he said, and then softer, "but it meant something to you." The truth hung there between them, gentle and devastating. Then, in that half-darkness, Archie did something he'd never done before. He reproposed. "Do you, Edith Baines, take Archie Bunker to be your lawfully wedded husband until you can't take him no more?" he asked, his voice breaking halfway through. She smiled, repeating the line, "Until I can't take you no more." It wasn't romantic, it was real. Two people acknowledging the weight of years, the fragility of forgiveness, and the strange, stubborn love that refuses to die. They went home. Life resumed uneven and fragile. And then the next blow came work. 30 years on the loading docks, 30 years of sweat and loyalty, and one morning it was all gone. The company lost a contract, the men lost their jobs, and Archie lost the only thing that ever made him feel secure. At the unemployment office, surrounded by strangers, he filled out forms that turned his life into statistics. The young clerk behind the counter looked at him like a relic. "We don't have anything for you right now," she said, reciting words she didn't mean. Archie tried to fight the humiliation with humor, but the cracks showed. "If the system can make a job for you," he said, "how come it can't make one for me?" The line meant as a joke was a scream disguised as comedy. Behind his bluster, Archie represented a dying generation, the men who built America's machines and were now discarded by them. The laughter of the audience wasn't just amusement, it was mourning. He had become a living symbol of obsolescence. When he came home that night, Edith was waiting. She'd set the table, her hands trembling, as she pretended everything was normal. The smell of cabbage and sausage filled the room. He didn't know how to tell her. "I got canned today," he finally muttered. "Fired, fired, fired." The word hung heavy in the air. For a moment, he wasn't Archie the loudmouth or the bigot or the fool. He was just a man scared of being nothing. Edith reached for his hand. "Everybody needs comfort and love," she said softly. "That don't make you a baby. It makes you more of a man." He looked at her, then really looked, maybe for the first time in years. The lines on her face, the kindness in her eyes, the quiet strength that had held him up all his life, she was still there. And he realized that while he'd spent years trying to prove he didn't need her, she had been the only thing keeping him human. That night after dinner, she sang softly while washing the dishes, an old tune from their youth. Archie sat in his chair pretending to read the paper, but really he was listening. "How deep is the ocean?" she sang. "How high is the sky?" Her voice was thin but steady, filled with the kind of love that doesn't shout but endures. When she finished, he whispered, "Whatever happens, I love you." She smiled, not looking up, as if she'd been waiting all along for him to say it. The laughter track faded, replaced by the creak of their old house settling into the night. The television hummed softly. Somewhere outside, a car horn blared and the city kept moving. But inside, for the first time in a long while, Archie and Edith sat together in peace. Not because they had solved their problems, but because they had finally stopped running from them. Their story isn't about betrayal or forgiveness, not really. It's about time, the slow erosion of certainty, the quiet grace of endurance, and the small mercies that keep people bound together when everything else falls apart. Archie Bunker will never stop being Archie Bunker, stubborn, loud, and wrong most of the time. But in this moment, stripped of pride and jokes, he becomes something rarer, a man learning, however late, what love truly costs. And as the old theme song plays one last time, boy, the way Glenn Miller played, it feels less like nostalgia and more like an elegy. A farewell to a generation of men who believed that strength meant silence, that love was obedience, that the world owed them permanence. The America Archie misses is gone. The America Edith represents the quiet, compassionate, resilient one, is what remains. The camera lingers on their living room, the worn-out couch, the framed wedding photo, the soft light spilling from the kitchen. Two people older now sitting side by side in a world that has moved past them, but not entirely without them. For all his faults, Archie Bunker endures. For all her pain, Edith Bunker forgives. And in that fragile, flickering balance between regret and grace, the story of a whole country is told. The night air in Queens carried the faint smell of gasoline and rain. Streetlights blinked like tired eyes, and somewhere in the distance, the subway rumbled that low, eternal hum of New York life that never really sleeps. Archie Bunker sat in Kelsey's bar, hands wrapped around a glass that had gone warm. The bar's neon sign flickered red and blue on his face, painting him like a soldier from another era stranded in peacetime. Around him, the world was moving, jukebox music, laughter, voices, but inside he was frozen. Denise, the young waitress, moved between tables with an easy rhythm. Her laughter wasn't loud, but it lingered light and musical. She laughed at Archie's jokes, not because they were funny, but because she saw something behind them, the lonely pride of an aging man who still wanted to feel alive. "You're cute, Mr. Bunker," she said, once her voice teasing. And for the first time in years, someone's eyes lit up when they looked at him. He hadn't felt that in so long. At home, Edith was kind but distracted, her life filled with volunteer shifts and casseroles for the Sunshine Home. The house was clean, the meals were hot, but the warmth between them had thinned into routine. The silence at dinner had become familiar, a silence that wasn't hostile but heavy, as if both were too tired to bridge the space between them. Archie wasn't a bad man, just a man who had run out of ways to be good. That night, he waited for Edith to stay home. But she left again, carrying an envelope and a smile, heading to deliver dentures to an old man. "He can't eat without 'em," she said, almost cheerfully. Archie forced a grin. When the door closed, he opened the bottle of tawny port he'd bought for her. The wine tasted sweet, desperate. He looked at his reflection in the window, a man half lit by television glow, and decided to take a walk. Denise's apartment smelled like perfume and cheap wine. The lights were soft, the kind of lighting that flatters everyone. She put on a record, something slow, something old, and told him to sit down. He did awkwardly, his body tense, his hands restless. He made jokes about the decor, about her cat, about himself. She laughed again, genuinely this time. For a while, it was just talk stories about the war, about Italy, about how the chocolate there tasted better than anywhere else. He threw in a few broken Italian phrases he barely remembered, pretending he was the kind of man who had once been interesting. Denise poured him another glass, her eyes kind but curious. And in that small, false intimacy, Archie found something he didn't know he'd lost attention. But then the doorbell rang. A kid, maybe 20, walked in tall, confident, unbothered. The delivery boy. He handed over the receipt, took one look at Archie, and smirked. "Have yourself a ball, pal," he said, walking out. The words echoed. They cut deeper than any insult. Suddenly, Archie saw himself through the boy's eyes, old, ridiculous, pathetic. The illusion shattered. He stood up too quickly, muttered something about forgetting his hat, and left the apartment. The streets were cold and wet, neon reflections trembling in puddles. Archie walked fast, as if motion could erase what had happened, or what almost did. By the time he got home, his shoes were soaked, his pride hollowed out. Edith was sitting in her chair, waiting, the television still on. She turned to him with a soft smile that made him ache. "Did you have a nice time at the bowling alley?" she asked. He nodded, forcing a laugh. "Yeah, we rolled a few strikes." She believed him. At least she wanted to. But later, when she did the laundry, a piece of paper fell from his pocket, a phone number written in a woman's handwriting. The confrontation came the next morning. Edith didn't raise her voice. She simply asked, "Who's Denise?" Her tone wasn't accusing, just disappointed. Archie tried to dodge, then to lie, then to joke. But the more he spoke, the smaller he became. "It didn't mean nothing," he said, finally, his voice cracking. "Nothing happened." Edith looked at him for a long time. Her eyes were tired, but not angry. "I could always count on you, Archie," she said quietly. "Now I can't count on you no more." Then she packed her bag and left. Without Edith, the house changed temperature. The air felt heavier, the walls quieter. Archie wandered from room to room looking for things to complain about, but there was no one to hear him. He went to Kelsey's every night, telling the same stories to the same men, but even they grew tired of pretending to laugh. When he came home, he'd turn on the TV and fall asleep in his chair, dreaming of nothing. Meanwhile, Edith was thriving in her own quiet way. At the Sunshine home, she became everyone's favorite visitor. She sang songs, fixed sweaters, brought joy into rooms where time had stopped. Surrounded by the elderly, she found freedom. There no one called her dingbat. No one dismissed her kindness as foolishness. She felt seen, perhaps for the first time in decades. When Gloria visited and tried to convince her to return home, Edith smiled sadly. He was thinking about doing what he said he didn't, she said, and that's enough. Archie, too proud to beg, showed up one evening anyway. The sun was setting behind the row houses, bathing everything in that soft golden light that makes even broken things look beautiful. He found Edith sitting on the porch folding laundry for the residents. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of a distant train filled the silence. He started talking about nonsense. The color of the porch, the neighbor's new car, the Mets. Edith listened politely. Finally, she asked, "Was she pretty?" Archie froze. "I told you it didn't mean nothing." She looked down at her hands. "It meant something to me." The world seemed to stop for a second. Then Archie, fumbling, as always, tried to find a joke to hide behind. "Do you, Edith Baines, take Archie Bunker to be your lawfully wedded husband until you can't take him no more?" She laughed, that familiar fluttery laugh that once filled their home, and replied, "Until I can't take you no more." It wasn't forgiveness in words, but in tone, in breath. They went home together that night, and for the first time in a long while, Archie felt the warmth of her beside him as they slept. But peace never lasts long. A few weeks later, the factory cut its workforce. Archie came home with his lunch pail empty and his pride bruised. 30 years, he muttered. 30 years! And they tossed me out like garbage. At the unemployment office, under fluorescent lights that buzzed like flies, he sat among strangers, people with the same look of confusion he wore. The young clerk at the counter spoke to him like a child. "Fill this out, sir." Wait 4 weeks for processing. Archie grumbled, but his anger was hollow. Now, if the system can make a job for you, he said, why can't it make one for me? The clerk didn't even look up. "That's not how it works, sir." Back home, he didn't tell Edith right away. He couldn't. When he finally did, she didn't say anything. She just took his hand, her touch as gentle as the first time they danced. "Everybody needs comfort and love," she said softly. "That don't make you weak. It makes you human." He cried then quietly, like a man learning for the first time that strength and weakness are sometimes the same thing. That night, they sat in the living room, the television flickering silently. The walls were the same, the furniture the same, but something had shifted. The air between them was lighter. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The years had already said everything for them. Edith hummed a song under her breath, something old, maybe Glenn Miller, maybe just a tune from her youth. Archie closed his eyes and listened. The melody carried him somewhere back in time, to the dances after the war, to the smell of perfume, and hope, to the feeling of being young and certain again. He reached out and took her hand. Whatever happens, he whispered, "I love you." Edith smiled faintly. "I know, Archie." Outside, the night deepened. The city kept moving, cars, trains, laughter from distant windows. The bunker house glowed softly in the dark, a small island of tenderness in a world that had forgotten how to be kind. When the credits roll in this imagined film, the camera lingers on that image. Two aging lovers sitting quietly in their worn-out living room, the sound of a record player spinning an old tune, and the words of the theme song drifting like a memory boy, the way Glenn Miller played. The lights fade, the music lingers, and in that fragile glow, one truth remains, even in a world that changes too fast for love to keep up. Sometimes love still does just enough.